Hi everybody, it's Christina from Adventures in Polish Land, and today I will be sharing my thoughts on How to Commit a Postcolonial Murder by Nina McConigley. I read this for the American Lit Reading Challenge for a book set in Wyoming, and this one is about two sisters. They are Indian American. Their father is an American man who travels a lot for work, and their mother is Indian. She is a stay-at-home mom. And right at the beginning of the book, we find out that their uncle and his family, so it's their mother's brother, comes to live with them from India. And it turns out that he is abusing them, and the only way they think they can get out of it is if they murder him. So they are telling us the story of how they have killed their uncle. So this book, I thought, had a great concept. It definitely has a gripping idea. It's very sad to think that there are these two young girls who are being abused. They feel as if they can't tell their mother what's happening because she is so happy to have family from India with them that they don't want to make her upset. And they feel like they can't tell their father. They're not really that close with him because he travels so much for work. And so their solution is we're going to murder him. So definitely a gripping plot. And I thought the idea behind this book was very interesting. Unfortunately, the execution and writing style just didn't work for me. This is a debut novel, and it did feel like that for me because the writing was a little bit clunky and a little bit experimental, and it just didn't feel focused. But first and foremost, the writing is in the second person. So the girls are telling the story to you as the reader, and they use that a lot. You this, you that. I don't have anything against a book in the second person. In fact, I really like The Virgin Suicides by Jeffrey Eugenides. I think it uses that point of view in a very unique way. But here it just felt a little clunky, and I think that's because the book is told in chapters, each labeled with a month, so that you're moving forward chronologically in time. However, there are chapters interspersed where they kind of go off on a tangent that doesn't fit in with the rest of the story. And there are also magazine quizzes interspersed randomly throughout as well. So it just felt a little choppy. I feel like the writing needed to be a little bit more focused. It just felt like our author didn't know which way she wanted to take the story, and she tried everything in this one book. So I didn't love the writing style. Another aspect of that was the author used words repeated in triplicate all throughout the story. So she would say, I have it written down here in my notes, that something split, 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 and it would be repeated, repeated, repeated. And I had a teacher in high school who would say repetition causes tension. And that is certainly the case because every time a word was repeated in triplicate, I was like, okay, I've had enough of this. I'm getting annoyed by now. So I'm not sure that gimmick, if you will, or just writing style worked for me. It was starting to annoy me. There was also an editing issue in this book. The story is set in 1986, and in one of the chapters, our protagonist is writing to her pen pal, and she's writing about the movie A Little Princess. And right away, an alarm bell went off in my head because I loved that movie as a kid. It was one of my favorite films, and I knew that it had come out in the 90s when I was born. So after I read the book, I did go back, and the movie A Little Princess did not come out until 1995, which is 9 years after the events of this novel. So just an editing mistake there, but it takes away from the authenticity of the book for me when these mistakes are glaring at me in the face. So although I did just criticize the writing a bit, I will say that I did find merit in this story. Like I said, it's a very intriguing concept to think of these young girls having to commit murder in order to protect themselves. And that's just really heartbreaking to think about. I will also say this book had a bit of a plot twist that I did not see coming, so I always appreciate that. If anyone else has gone to law school, you'll have to let me know if once you went to law school you have found so many books and movies predictable because you are literally trained to predict outcomes through your schooling. And so when a book can surprise me with a plot twist in my post-law school lawyerly brain, I really appreciate that. So that was great for me in this novel. And I also really liked how this book explored the differences and similarities between Native American Indians and Indians from India, because these girls live in rural Wyoming, and I'm glad I read this for the American Lit Reading Challenge because we learned a lot about the landscape where they lived and different history of the area, so that was really interesting and educational for me because I really know nothing about Wyoming. And because they are some of the only people of color in their area, they often get treated in a way where they are seen as Native Americans and not Indians from India. It's really fascinating. And they compare and contrast their treatment and their experience with their classmates. So, for example, whenever they do the Thanksgiving pageant, they're the Native Americans, even though they're not Native American, right? Just because they're the ones with darker skin, they're the other, and they get treated as such in their community. So I found that really interesting. So that being said, I wasn't really sure how the book used post-colonialism because sort of the tagline between how to commit a post-colonial murder is that the girls are supposedly blaming them killing their uncle on post-colonialism, and they're supposed to have all these experiences of suffering from post-colonialism, but I wasn't really seeing that connection in the book. They talked about it a little bit, but I think I just wasn't understanding the whole point of how they're tying this murder back to post-colonialism. Maybe that's just me and I didn't get it, but I didn't find that connection very strong in the book, and I would have liked a little bit more explanation of that. So at the end of the day, I gave this a 3-star rating, which is still not bad. Like I said, I learned from it, especially about Wyoming and where they lived. I really liked that exploration into not fitting into one box or the other, especially in their small community, and especially where they have a white American father and an Indian mother. But the writing just wasn't very cohesive for me, and because of that, I'm not sure I would recommend this book. I think perhaps if you find the plot interesting and you really like experimental writing, you might enjoy this, but otherwise it's one that I would probably say to pass on. But I would love to hear your thoughts. This is a newer release, and I think this author has a great road ahead of her. She's done other writing. This is just her first novel, but I would love to see how her writing develops more when she has a better idea of her style and the way she wants to use that going forward. If you have any recommendations for books set in Wyoming, I would love to hear them in the comments. And if you're interested in learning more about the other books that I've read for the American Lit Reading Challenge, I will have my playlist linked in the description box below, along with a link to this book on bookshop.org. That will be an affiliate link. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!